Ms. Vaughn, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Avery?
Here.
Mr. Hetty?
I am here.
Mr. Croteau?
Present.
Mrs. Chandler?
Here.
Chairman Day?
Here, would you please stand and join us in the pledge? Mr. Don Cottrell will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Moving on with the agenda, I requested up here, we have a little memo that we sent out. Chairman Daigle will be asking the Commission to hear presentations before public comment on today's agenda because there are some presenters who must leave early today. Is that okay with the Commission?
As long as we have the opportunity to ask questions of
Yes, sir.
the presenters before they leave.
Okay. And if I could back up, please, we need to vote on accepting the minutes. Ms. Vaughn?
No, just
Aye.
I think just a normal, all in favor.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving on, our first presenter is Mr. Bob Solari, County Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and High Speed Rail Commission. I'd like to begin by thanking you for your work. I mean, one of the things as an elected official that is almost thrilling to me is when the public gets up and exercises self-government rather than expecting the government to do everything for them. This is one of those issues where not only yourselves on the High Speed Rail Commission, but a lot of other people in the community, people, some here today like Susan Meehill, Phyllis Fry, down south Casey Trailer, have really risen up and done some of the work that you would have expected the government officials like myself might have done a little bit earlier. I am very appreciative for their work. They're bringing out a tremendous amount of information, which I believe is very valuable for our community. So I think they all ought to be applauded, yourselves included, and I will take this opportunity to thank you and the others for that. I want to give a little update on some of the county actions in the last month or two related to the All Aboard Florida. One is, if you watched the last Tuesday's meeting, we had sent a letter to All Aboard Florida when we thought it was a somewhat different animal, and we sent that letter in favor of it a few months ago. We've since rescinded that letter. We've also got a resolution asking that no government agencies give any funding of any sort to All Aboard Florida. If it does go, it ought to be a private company with private resources and not government resources, which gets it and moves it along. We, almost all of us here, know that towards the end of May, there'll be an EIS comment period. The EIS, as I understand it, the Environmental Impact Statement, is being composed now, and towards the end of May, a comment period will begin, and we'll have a chance to speak on it. The county hired a consultant to help us with that, and I think that while the county is working on it, the municipalities such as the city of Vero Beach still need to do all they can do to make sure we get as much out of the comment period as we can. One of the things I learned in the last few weeks is that the complexity of the EIS is probably somewhat daunting, and that it's going to take some work to work through it and get the best benefit we can for our community. I've also had the pleasure of meeting with Mr. Rusty Roberts and Vince Signorello, and that tells me that the other side of this, All Aboard Florida, it has some very, very talented folks. And they are focused and hardworking, so I think that we need to do all we can to make sure that the citizens of, especially the Treasure Coast, are well represented. What I came across something that Mr. Signorello, when I was preparing for a meeting with him, said, and I'd like to quote that because I think it tells us something about both the quality of the All Aboard Florida people and their focus. You must develop a crystal clear picture of where you want to end up and stay firmly in control of the smartest lawyers, bankers, and accountants you can find to execute your vision. His tips for success: understand and access varied sources of capital. Quote, these sources are seldom viable all at the same time. And he also says that you need to learn the minutiae of deal structures and documentation early in your career. Quote, it will ultimately save money, time, and most importantly, allow you to drag deals across the finish line. When I read that, and after I met Mr. Signorello, with whom I was very impressed, I realized that we needed to get somebody else on our team. And last Tuesday, the county authorized our county attorney to hire an attorney who has some knowledge about EISs, and I think that'll help balance the playing field a little bit. Recently, the All Aboard Florida supported a move to 75 days for the comment period, and I want to applaud All Aboard Florida for that. But again, I think that the playing field isn't quite as level as we might want it to be. I have a quote from a Press Journal newspaper article. Quote, "Public feedback is an essential component of the environmental review process, and we will honor All Aboard Florida's request to extend the public comment period from 45 days to 75 days," he said Wednesday, referring to Mike England, a spokesman for the Federal Railroad Administration. Now, I'd like to note, we've had many public officials, probably some 100, 200 citizens, requesting that the Florida Railroad Association extend the comment period from 45 to 90 days. And I haven't heard of anybody who's actually got a real word back from them. But All Aboard Florida suggested to them, and they get an almost immediate response, positive to their days. So I'm amazed that All Aboard Florida gets credit for the extension to 75 days when the Federal Railroad Association doesn't even respond positively to the citizens, which I would have thought it would have had some concern about. So I just want us to pay attention to that, because I think it may show a bias on the part of the Federal Railroad Agency administration, and that's going to be a problem for us. This Wednesday, All Aboard Florida will be taken up by our Metropolitan Planning Organization, which includes the municipalities such as Vero Beach, and I hope that that's well attended. And I believe that the MPO will get a little bit more involved in trying to coordinate some of our actions. I also want to note that I was at a rally a week ago Sunday down in Stewart. It was attended by about 400 people. They were basically against All Aboard Florida. And again, it's an indication of the grassroots movement, which, as far as I can tell, is still growing. I was at a meeting down at Mariner Sands last Thursday, and there are more and more homeowners associations getting organized to make sure that the right thing is done with both the environmental impact statement and the railroad. That's basically what I wanted to update you on today. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I could. Oh, let me take one more opportunity. Back April 10th, when I did meet Mr. Roberts, I gave him a fairly detailed information request. I'm just hoping that Mr. Roberts will be able to tell me when I might get that information. It's the type of information that I'd need in order to fulfill my fiduciary duty as an elected official before I can make a decision for the public. So I certainly hope that's forthcoming sooner rather than later. Yes, ma'am.
What time is the meeting on Wednesday?
The meeting is at 10 o'clock. It's in Building B at the County Administration Complex.
Any other questions? Mr. Heading?
Bob, thanks for giving us your presentation. Do you know who's doing the EIS?
CDM, I believe, is the consultant for the county.
No,
They have other
that's not the question. I'm sorry. Who's writing the environmental impact statement?
I think Mr. Roberts will be able to answer that question a little better than I can, but what I was told is that they have a large number of consultants which help them put together aspects of the EIS. So I would say that All Aboard Florida is putting it together, but through their consultants, and they will be delivering the information to the Florida Railroad Administration, and they will actually then put the document together, which will then be made public. That's my understanding.
Because it's my understanding that the Federal Rail Commission is the entity that is putting the environmental impact statement together.
No, well, my understanding is that all the information comes from the All Aboard Florida consultants, and that basically the Federal Railroad Administration organizes it and puts it into the form for which it will then be delivered to the public.
Okay, well, certainly the All Aboard Florida has input to it, but I think it's important to note that the Federal Rail Commission is the one that's actually putting it together, so it's their document. How much are the county taxpayers, which includes the city, how much are we paying for the consultants at the county level? Would we authorize up to $100,000?
No, not for the consultants. It was either $28,000 or $35,000. For the attorney, it was up to $100,000.
28 to 35 for the consultants, and another 100 for the attorney, so we've authorized $135,000 of tax dollars
So far.
for this purpose so far. You talked about the quality of the All Aboard Florida people, and then made the comment that if you drag enough bankers and lawyers to the table, they can drag the thing across the finish line.
No, that wasn't the comment at all.
Okay?
I'll reread it if you want to, if you'd like me to.
Just straighten me out, that's all. I appreciate it.
You must develop a crystal clear picture of where you want to end up and stay firmly in control of the smartest lawyers, bankers, and accountants you can find to execute your vision. That is what I said.
Okay. And that's for
That's a quote from Mr. Signorello.
All Aboard Florida. If they put the smartest people together, they can execute the vision of this railroad. You said that the county, and you just said $100,000 was going to hire an attorney, and that was to balance the playing field. When someone tells me that they want to balance the playing field, the question that it raises in my mind is, what did you think was out of balance?
I think that the All Aboard Florida people, particularly after meeting Mr. Signorello, had tremendous skills in certain areas which nobody that I know of in the county government has. I'll note that Mr. Signorello was, in 2011, the South Florida Business Journal 2011 CFO Deal of the Year winner, and in 2013, he was named a South Florida Power Leader. He has worked for Lehman Brothers, Barclays, and now Florida East Coast Industries. He is incredibly well-versed in finance and real estate. He's put a team together which has incredible skills in finance and real estate. I think they've probably been working with the consultants to gather the information for the EIS for a number of months. So I think they have a head start. And so what I meant by balance the playing field was to get someone with some of the skills necessary to match those of FECI so that we make the most of the environmental impact statement.
Okay, it just seems to me that if a governing official is willing to spend $135,000 tax dollars, which is significant to me anyway, that they must have thought that it was out of balance in favor of or against, not in favor of the taxpayers, not in favor of the residents, but rather against it. And I mean, if what you believed was that All Aboard Florida was coming in to do 100 wonderful things, you wouldn't need to spend $135,000 to balance things. You'd say, thank you, All Aboard Florida. You said more and more homeowners associations are coming together to fight this, and I think that's accurate. I think that the groundswell to fight All Aboard Florida is certainly building momentum, and at the risk of having the crowd come up and beat me to a pulp, I think that organizing people to be against All Aboard Florida is short-sighted. I think that All Aboard Florida has an obligation, and I think that their obligation is to, if they're going to put passenger service on these rails, that their obligation is to put it in a way that's consistent with safety, that's consistent with current law, and that includes our current speed limits and noise ordinances and 100 other things. That the railroad should be responsible for the safety and not the taxpayers. You added that your questions weren't answered, and I would echo that concern. I asked questions at the very first meeting, and All Aboard Florida has yet to answer those questions. And the first meeting was back in the beginning of January, and I still haven't gotten any answers. And in fact, I asked for some representatives from All Aboard Florida who could answer those questions if they could be here at today's meeting. And Tammy sent that notice out, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And the answer was not in the affirmative. They're not here. Rusty Roberts is here, but without comment as to what his abilities are or aren't, I can tell you that he hasn't answered publicly the questions that I've asked at the very first meeting. Thank you.
Commissioner Solari, when you meet up with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council group, would you be able to revisit the conversation with them to further ask the Federal Rail Administration for the extra days? I know the county has requested 180 at the Regional Council Planning Council number, I think about a month ago, month and a half. They asked for a full 90 days. So I was wondering if you could revisit that conversation again to send out if they would send notes out as a board to get the amount of time that we need. The 75 days is going to be kind of tight for us.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I think the next council meeting is this Friday, and I'd be happy to do that. And if this board, by the end of the day, wanted to put some sort of letter or resolution in support of that, I'd be happy to take it down to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council at that time. And I think I just may add the counties to that tomorrow. I've got All Aboard Florida, my matters on the agenda, and I'll suggest the same thing if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Solari, I got your comment about the All Aboard Florida recommending the increase to 75 days. I think they made another recommendation or agreed to hold 2 additional public hearings, one in each county. Did you get a verification of that from them?
Yes, that was in the same PR release from All Aboard Florida. I believe there are 8 counties involved. There were 6 meetings scheduled, and they raised that to 8, so there'd be 1 meeting in each county, which I think is a very positive step. So I do want to applaud All Aboard Florida for those positive steps. But again, for me, it's material that the Federal Railroad Administration seemed to respond quickly to All Aboard Florida, but ignore a lot of the citizens and elected officials who've asked for 90 days. I find that problematic. And again, that's one of the indicators to me, sir, that it's not really a level playing field. A lot of times when you're talking about bureaucracies, there's a certain ideology in the bureaucracy, and people tend to follow that ideology rather than worry about exactly where the scales of justice ought to be at a given point in time.
And I think it would be important, Commissioner, if the conversation that you just had, where they did give the All Aboard Florida folks an answer quite quickly, that should be pointed out when the paperwork's sent to the federal people, and also to the congressmen to point that out to them. An answer was given quite quickly, and could they help us out also with an answer?
I intended to do that
tomorrow
at the BCC meeting, and I'd be happy to do that at the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council also.
Anyone else on the commission have questions for the commissioner? Thank you very much, sir, for coming over.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Mr. Phil Mattson with the MPO. He's the director there. If you would please come up and share with us your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Phil Mattson, Indian River County MPO, and it's a pleasure to be here, as always. And just want to update my previous presentation and give you an idea of what developments have occurred at the county level and through some other jurisdictions, which is maybe one function I could help you with, because I know there's a lot of information out there now. At the last BCC meeting, the board voted to rescind their earlier letter of support. That was a unanimous vote by the Board of County Commissioners. There is also a authorization for legal services, and I apologize if you just heard an update on all of this from the BCC. Maybe thinking you're a little deja vu here, but Solari Jr.
You guys resemble yourself.
Okay.
The haircuts are a little different.
The hair.
So the county did go ahead and hire a consultant to help them evaluate the more technical aspects, really all aspects of the environmental impact statement, which we've been told is imminent sometime in the May-June timeframe, and here it is May. CDM Smith was hired. It's a worldwide firm. They have 5,000 employees, so they have fairly robust resources and pretty good technical expertise in the areas that we are going to be reviewing. They're headquartered in Cambridge, Mass. CDM Smith is going to be able to help the county in areas where it might not have the expertise or need it on a daily basis, like noise and vibration. But they're also, to clear up a misconception I heard earlier, going to look at the entire EIS and they're looking at it from an entire jurisdiction perspective, everywhere in the county, the cities, incorporated, unincorporated, et cetera. So they're going to be helping us out when this eventually comes out. Board took a couple of other actions. They requested that all aboard be made to pay for its entire costs, that none of these costs be sent either directly from a federal funding agency or indirectly through enhanced costs over time for maintenance and upkeep and the like, and those costs not be descended upon the local jurisdictions. So that pretty much sums up the actions that the Board of County Commissioners has taken. The FRA representative evaluated All Aboard Florida's diagnostic report, and Federal Rail Administration, they actually went out into the field and, as you know, came out with an on-site engineering field report where they recommended that All Aboard be held to sealed corridor standards. That report is available at the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council's website. It's an interesting report. The Regional Planning Council, speaking of them, Kim Delaney, who seems to know the processes probably better than any one person in the Treasure Coast area, will be coming back to speak to us at the MPO meeting. That'll be 10 o'clock Wednesday in room B1501. In addition to showing us the context of All Aboard and the other rail initiatives here, she has a very good knowledge of when the next steps are coming, where the public hearings will be held and when and how many. As Commissioner Solari pointed out, we did find out that we're going to be given 75 days for evaluation. The Regional Planning Council on Friday is going to be considering 5 action items with respect to All Aboard. One is a repeat of the financial questions and the organizational structure of All Aboard. Another is a request that all local governments request the 90-day evaluation period. It's being done kind of piecemeal by different jurisdictions, but one of their action items is that there be a uniform request among all jurisdictions. There's an item about St. Lucie Village. It's an area to our south outside of our jurisdiction, particularly concerns they have about adding additional track to their already double track segment. FRA holding workshops in the region, and we've heard a little bit about that now, and we are very happy that they will be holding them here. And echoing a sealed corridor recommendation that we've heard to our south, that the sealed corridor or higher safety standards be applied throughout. I know Martin County, really to wrap it up, and what I've heard and late developments, has asked to take a look at environmental justice concerns about proposed closures and proposed safety treatments, and that these be done uniformly. Anybody familiar with environmental justice? Ever heard that term before? Okay, environmental justice is basically that any federal action or any federally funded action have uniform impacts across all jurisdictions regardless of the wealth, the disadvantaged status, whatever, of each jurisdiction. And, you know, going back to the 1960s planning rubric, typically the neighborhoods that couldn't represent themselves well were raised, renewed, if you will. Interstate highway systems were built through those parts of town, and it created a lot of disenfranchisement. There was rioting in the wake of it, and some of these things have really never healed up. So the environmental justice executive order came down, applies to the federal government and federal money from the federal government, that be assessed, that these impacts don't fall disproportionately on a underprivileged community. So I believe there's some concerns about that down in Martin County. And I'll see if the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council has any follow-up on that. I've been asked by the chairman to take a look at what a metropolitan statistical area is and what a urbanized area is and what our status is up here in Indian River. And I can tell you that we are both a metropolitan statistical area, considered so by the Office of Management and Budget and the Census Bureau. We're also an urbanized area. And the urbanized area definition, in a nutshell, is where you have 1,000 people per mile, population of 1,000 or more per mile, contiguously situated to total 50,000 people or more. So where you have that, you have what's considered an urbanized area. Then branching out from that, they go up to 500 people per mile on all subsequently contiguous areas. When they have a drop-off, they assess the drop-off and see if there's not some sort of impediment to continuous population. A lagoon would be a good example, where you have a populated area on both sides of the lagoon meeting that 500 or 1,000 person standard, and yet they're separated by something. If you have adequate transit links and transportation links connecting them, then that barrier island too is considered part of the urbanized area. You get a lot of industrial areas, no population in them, airports. Those areas are also considered skips. So if the contiguous population on either side of an airport meets the threshold, then the airport too, and everything on both sides is considered urbanized. Long story short, we're considered an urbanized area from county line to county line in the eastern portions of the county. That's mostly east of 58th Avenue. There are some extensions of our urbanized area status out to town of Fellsmere, meets the minimal standard, and everything running along 510 and 512. Fellsmere might be a freestanding urban cluster, but it's a little irrelevant to the all-aboard discussion because there's no track out there. But everything and every inch of the population where the county lies is considered urbanized area. So that pretty much sums it up. I really don't know what the urbanized area distinction means with respect to evaluating the impacts of all aboard or EIS, but it was something I was asked to research for you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's about all I have.
Questions, please, from the board?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Phil, the county voted to rescind the letter. Unfortunately, when you have a situation like that, some entity is going to use only the in favor letter, or someone's only going to use the rescind letter, and it just kind of depends on which point of view you're trying to prove. And you hired somebody to question that EIS, and they're headquartered in Massachusetts, up around the Boston area. And I can tell you, and Tammy would tell you, that consultants from the Boston area raise lots of questions and lots of red flags. We've had our fair share of consultants from the Boston area. I think Mr. Solari could probably fill you in a little bit on some of the problems with consultants from the Boston area. Anyway, Kim Delaney back to speak. Penny Chandler, during one of the meetings, Penny Chandler had brought an example of a crossing and some of the cost involved. And what it was is a 50-some-odd page report from Fort Collins, Colorado. And when I looked into it, it bore zero resemblance to Vero Beach. In the report that Ms. Chandler brought to the board, the speed limit going into the town is 10 miles an hour. So it's hardly a high speed when you consider they've spoken about numbers as high as 110 miles an hour rather than 10 miles an hour. And one of the things that Kim had said at a meeting was, no, it wasn't the town that Penny had brought, but rather she named another town. And I asked Tammy to file a public records request for me on behalf of myself and any of the council members who cared to look into the report on the town that Kim Delaney said was the real example. And when we asked for that report, we're told by Kim that there is no public report. There's nothing for the public to see. So I'll tell you, that raises lots of questions in my mind, because if she's reporting on something that is the example of what we'll see here in Vero, and yet there's nothing to see, then I just have to, and if she ever had something, it's public record. Once she had it in her hands, once somebody delivers to a public official documents to convey some information, that becomes a public record. So if she ever saw it, then she has an obligation to turn it over, and she said there is no report that she has. She's never seen one, I guess. So maybe you can follow up and you can find out what example they want to use on what the crossings would look like. And you said that you would like the questions to be uniform from all of the communities up and down. And I'll tell you, I would ask that's not the proper way to approach this for all of the communities, because the Vero Beach might have something unique to Vero Beach that is not a concern of all the other communities. I still want Vero Beach's concerns out there. Whether or not anybody else agrees that it should be a concern is of no concern to me. I am concerned about Vero Beach and Indian River County, and I want our questions to be asked and answered. The sealed corridor, I've heard so many things one way or another on this railroad since I've been on this commission that after a while my head just spins and I'm trying to figure out who's on first. So last week I went to up by that consultant in Boston. I went up there to Boston, and I took the high-speed rail, the only high-speed rail on the East Coast. I went on it, and I have videos, I have still pictures. I wanted to see for myself just exactly what a high-speed rail looks like and what the crossings look like, and whether or not there's the kinds of backups that we hear will be caused by the railroad, or whether or not they have these safety procedures and additional safety equipment. I wanted to see that for myself, and if this commission wants, I'd be happy to do a slideshow of those. But it's interesting what I saw, and that is, if you want to know what the crossings look like where there's high-speed rail, go out here and look at what we have here in Vero Beach, because they're no different. And the sealed corridor, I can tell you that I saw and have photos. In some areas there was a sealed corridor, and in other areas the fence had been taken down by trees falling down in wintertime, by crashes into the fence, by a couple of spots where it looked like the fence had been purposefully cut for some reason. And so the so-called sealed corridor was anything but sealed. And there were large gaps in the corridor, in the fencing. It didn't extend from one end to the other on the Acela. So to do something that's similar to what other areas have is not a lot different than what we see out right there right now. There were plenty of areas along the line that had absolutely no fencing, absolutely nothing to seal the corridor off. And it's interesting to see or hear that we're urbanized. I went through what I would consider urbanized and took pictures, and there's a real mix of where urbanized areas look like they were really profiting from the railroad because they were gorgeous areas that the railroad was going through, the high speed, and there were other areas that pretty much looked like it was the other side of the tracks. But I remember areas looking like that, 60 years ago when I was on railroads. I've taken them for a long time. From county line to county line being considered urban, I think that you'll agree that you can go through a lot of areas in that section that look nothing at all like what you would really consider an urban area.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly low standard, 1,000 people per square mile. The Census Bureau at some point dictated that the problems of urbanization, urban services, water, sewer, traffic volumes that might result in delays and so forth, start to accumulate at the 1,000 persons per square mile level, and therefore set that as the minimum standard. We benefit from that designation, let me tell you, in a couple of ways. One is highway funding. The other is transit funding. Our GO line system is probably 50% run by the feds. So it's just a bottom floor threshold of what they consider an urbanized area.
Yeah, and
doesn't mean, when you think of urban, I agree, you think of tenements and high rises and all this. No, it's 1,000 persons per square mile, regardless of the land use and affluence.
And if you go back and you look at what the MPO and even the county, Bob left, and even the county, you can find example after example where the MPO and the county and the state of Florida have all given some very, very positive considerations towards all of Ward, Florida, where at the state level, it's something that the state wants. At the MPO level, something that the MPO wants, and they've given testimony to help further All Aboard Florida's cause. And now what we're doing is hire attorneys, which seem to me sound like they want to fight All Aboard Florida. And generally speaking, I have an aversion to governing authorities using the taxpayers to fight a private company. It's damn near impossible for a private company to beat government if government wants to take them down. I mean, the amount of dollars that government has is endless because they think, governing officials think that our collective wallets have no bottom, that they can continue to spend our money. And what we're doing in this example is we're spending a lot of taxpayer dollars to fight a report that's being put out by the Federal Rail Commission, which is tax dollars. And we're just using money to fight ourselves. And at some point, you have to recognize the insanity of that.
Ms. Chandler?
Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. You made a comment earlier about St. Lucie Village, and would you repeat that just in respect to the relevance to this committee?
Sure, I'll try to. Basically, what I was doing is updating you on what other jurisdictions are doing, which is one of my charges here. And the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council will be considering 5 items on Friday relative to All Aboard. I'd have to say that's the one that doesn't affect us.
Okay, thank you.
When you are talking to your consultants about EIS and other things, I'd like to suggest a couple of things you might ask them to look into.
Sure.
One is, do we, in response to an EIS, have the opportunity to suggest alternatives? One of the things that has come up is an alternative would be to have the high-speed train be solely passenger and not run on freight. With freight, there may be some significant problems that may arise by having high-speed rail running coterminously with freight on the same line. And one of the reasons why they don't, you can't mitigate some of the concerns about safety and speed and what have you is I don't think it's possible in this jurisdiction to elevate the freight. My understanding is the All Aboard Florida, in the line that goes from Orlando to Cocoa before it connects to the FEC corridor, will be elevating over the major highways that it'll be crossing. And the reason they can do that is because no freight will be allowed on that. There will be no freight trains. So I'm looking at, is there a basic incompatibility, or what would be the basic arguments to say that there is a basic inherent incompatibility with high-speed rail as envisioned by All Aboard Florida and the freight that's going on the existing corridor.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir, for coming over. Really appreciate your update.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matson. All right, now we'll open it up for, would you rather go first, Mr. O'Connor, for under your...
See if you go on to the agenda like you're doing. I just moved because I was next.
Okay. We did. You weren't here, and we decided to move the presentations and then have the public comment. If you guys want to come on up, you're more than welcome. We'll just do Mr. City Manager, then our Public Works Director to give us an update of what's on the agenda. Then we'll go into public input. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, I was here and we're under presentation, so that's the reason I...
Thank you, sir.
Okay. And you had some questions on there. Provide an update on the city department meetings as it relates to All Aboard Florida. EIS, please be assured at all of our staff meetings every Tuesday we do talk about All Aboard Florida and what are some of the expectations on the EIS and how we were interfaced with those. You also asked us to discuss the analysis and scope of expected documentation. We feel like we're going to be giving input into that, but we plan to use the MPO as our forward leader on that. As you understand, the county, and I think it's been explained, not only will the consultant be looking at all the crossings and all the impacts of the county, but we think a united front is the best way to go. So we plan to participate. We obviously already have positions. For example, we have council members on the MPO board, and on the technical advisory committee, we have representation on those those as well. So we'll be able to work with Phil at all levels of that process of the MPO. But again, we feel like that they need to be sort of the agency that represents all the impacts, going back to Mr. Hetty, that the City of Vero Beach impacts are included in those comments as it goes forward to make sure that they are recognized. And how we are coordinating and preparing for a collected of information. We're doing that on two fronts. One is that we understand that we have to do our land use and the various departments that will have that impact, but also the City Council has appointed Amelia Graves to an ad hoc committee that is really represented by all the cities, Sebastian Fellsmere, the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County. They're also including folks like the Chamber of Commerce. They're talking to the folks from the Heritage Foundation, because the historical impacts and the cultural impacts are very important parts and elements of this. So we will be using that ad hoc information from that ad hoc committee, as well as putting together what the staff has when we see the format and the process and the questions of the EIS. But I think it's going to be really critical that we have to wait and see what's in that EIS report before we start speculating what our responses are going to be and how we put that together. So we're waiting for that. I just got an email today that talked about if you want to be a coordinating member of the EIS, that we need to register. I've asked Bonnie Falls to do that, to register with the Florida Department of Transportation. What that means is we should get the EIS as early as anyone else in the process. So we will try to do that. I think Phil is from the counties already there, and the city of Sebastian is also looking at that as an option. So we will get that draft EIS report and proceed in accordance.
Ms. Chandler?
I had asked for those items to be included in the agenda, and the reason was we had heard from Mr. Gruber, who's now gone back to his permanent residence
in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, right. And he had provided our group with samples of what the environmental assessment in the southern leg had included, and indicated that those same topic areas would be included in the environmental impact study. And the reason I had added this to the agenda was I recognize that there are members of the council that are included on the Metropolitan Planning Organization and attend those meetings. But if indeed the staff from the city are the people that are pulling together the information in order to respond to the environmental impact study, then I wanted some explanation as to how the material that the staff is preparing is going to be provided to the council members so that when they go to the MPO, they can submit that. Perhaps Monty's also on the MPO?
MPO Technical Advisory, that's the folks that assemble the information. They and Phil assemble the information that goes to the MPO, the elected officials. So that's where the foundation of the decision making is based on that. And so Monty and I believe Tim McGarry, and Eric Manger, they are the part of the technical advisory and help put that information together. So we have three representatives.
Because it does appear that we might know the topics ahead of time, that we can be prepared to provide that information.
And we have distributed those topic, and I think most everyone that was going to be impacted understands the name of the topic, but again, the response to those that will be contained. But yes, we have representation on all the levels that ultimately have that consultant who will be putting our responses together.
And you had said about the city of Sebastian. I did receive a copy of a couple of emails that went from their city manager to DOT, and then moved on up to FRA, asking questions about the collaborating, and got a response right away back down through, indicating that they could be named as a cooperating agency by the lead agency. That all they needed to do was request that.
Is that Mr. Wilkes?
Yes, it is.
And I think that, isn't that the Federal Department of Transportation, or is that the state?
Looks like it's
DOT.
Florida.
I think it's USDOT.
It went first from the city manager in Sebastian to Catherine Dobbs, and a copy to DOT at the state level. Catherine Dobbs at FRA.
Is Mr. Wilkes, is he the
Yes.
state?
Transportation industry analyst. I'll send that down to Tammy.
He's USDOT is what we think. We have the same information, and that's what Monty will be responding to, and using Mr. Wilkes as our point of contact there.
So
Same as
what you're saying is that the city's also going to make this request from the
That is
city of Vero
correct.
Beach? And
Yes.
is that, can we make a recommendation here? I'll make a recommendation that we request the city to make that submission and request being a collaborating agency.
That would be great if you all want to vote on that. We sort of took it on ourselves,
well.
I guess, because I got that today. But yes, that's a motion if you want to.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We will proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Cortell, if you could just a moment. Mr. Herdy.
Go ahead.
Jim, when we started this process, a lot of our discussion was around quiet zones and the cost of quiet zones, and we came up with a very high estimate of quiet zones might cost us up to $3 million. In the meantime, looking at what quiet zone requirements are and what is already in place in the city, it looks as though most of our intersections already comply for quiet zones, with the exception of having a sign up that says the train ain't going to blow its horn. Basically, is all you'd have to do with at least 3 or 4 of our intersections. In a meeting that was held, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce a week or so ago, I asked the question, and it was stated that it would not be a good idea for the city to try to figure out what our costs are going to be until we know what the EIS is going to require or what the Federal Railroad Administration is going to require of all aboard Florida for their intersections for seal court or what have you, and that in reality we need to wait for that before we can really do an analysis of what quiet zones may or may not cost. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir, it is. As a matter of fact, that would be, I'm not sure we could draw any conclusions because the double arms, as an example, may be required under the safety requirements that all aboard Florida will be installing as just a standard practice at those intersections.
Right.
And that would meet the
That would meet it. If they install those that are already there, and that way the only additional cost would be putting up signs.
Right, and we have also seen, for example, in Fort Pierce, they have some of that channelization on some of their city streets, so which would be a very low cost if we need to do that as well.
Right. Now, one of the things when we first started, we found out we already had objections, or we had received complaints from citizens in both the county and the city about the freight train horns that were blowing.
Yes, sir. Freight trains obviously have been going through for many, many, many years. But I think it's one of those, you bring stuff like that to somebody's attention, and you will find people that object to those freight train horns.
So if we pursue the idea of doing that, and the only cost to us would be to put a few signs up, we'd be mitigating an existing condition as well as a future condition.
Well, I don't necessarily agree the existing condition. For example, some of our city streets, we don't have the double arms that we anticipate will come as a safety. So we still don't meet the quiet zones at those intersections due to the fact that you can go around them. But when all aboard Florida comes through, hopefully they have to put up the double arms.
Right, that I understand.
Right.
But I'm just saying, if we had take the position we should spend $0 for any of these kinds of things, I'm just suggesting that if we had to put up some signs to say, apply for quiet zones, that would be a legitimate expense because we're mitigating an existing condition.
Yes, sir, and we would use our own sign shop.
Thank you.
Mr. Hetty?
Yeah, Mr. Chandler had talked about since we're going to have some information coming back from FRA that we would know the topics. Correct me if, or my misunderstanding, but aren't all of the topics for an EIS pretty well prescribed already? And the EIS is outlined, as I understand it, in topics that must be addressed in order to conform to an environmental impact statement.
It's my understanding the topics are in a format
In
that we
format.
have seen because of what
So we know-
took place in South Florida. We have and I can't swear that that's all the topics, but yes, we do have the format.
So we know what the topics are.
Yes.
And then the quiet zones, when Dan first started, said that we already have in place, we already comply. I can tell you that our crossings comply with what I saw on the Acela. As far as whether they comply with some quiet zone standard, I think I've asked that question. Is there somebody that can show me where that standard is? And I haven't gotten anybody yet to give me a copy of what that standard is for the quiet zone.
We had a publication that showed some drawings of quiet zone designs,
and designs.
but none of that has been approved. It has to be approved through the Federal Railroad Administration, is the way I understand it. So
Right.
until you make application to them and apply, you do not know.
You don't know. Right. So you don't know what the standards are, which makes it pretty difficult.
That's correct. Although if we're pretty sure, as an example, when All Aboard Florida comes through and they put the double arms down and all those other things, then when we make application, we will feel relatively secure that there's not too much more you can do to those intersections. Now, if they leave them like they are, then I think we do have another challenge at that point.
If they put double arms in, I can tell you that will exceed many of the crossings, the safety provisions that I saw at many of the crossings will exceed what I saw.
Anyone else with questions on the commission? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Coming up. Okay, now we'll open it up for public comment, and thank you for your patience. Yes, sir, come right up. State your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon. I'm Nick Schaus, Sable Oak Drive in Vero Beach. And horns, that's what I first heard 4 months ago when I came in January. And I don't want to pick on Mr. Roberts, but I know you asked him, what does a horn sound like? And there was two long, a short, and a long, which is a little different, I think, and at 100 decibels. And have you ever gotten the answer yet? What a horn from Mr. Roberts? We don't want to pick on him. But maybe he can bring a horn sometime.
I don't know that he'd want to set it off inside this room, though.
Oh, it's not going to. You'll get used to it, Mr. Hetty. You'll get used to it. Mr. Chairman,
I get used to kids. I guess I get used to railroad noise. Right?
Okay. An article in the paper about the city needs to know where it is legally with the railroad. And I think Mr. Roberts answered that also. He said that if we weren't looking for any loans, they could run as many freight, as many passengers within the prescribed speed limits as FRA as much as they want. So this is one of the places you stand, but fortunately you have some time because they don't have a loan, so they're not going to act like they could. There are people who are going around this county and other county, and they're not organizing people, but they are informing them because there's so many people don't know what is going to happen. And one particular subdivision is it's around the $65,000 range, and a bedroom is in 43 feet of the tracks. And there are, I'd say, maybe 60 houses on both sides of the tracks in that category. We've seen some studies where a high-speed train would take values down by 10, 20%. Some of those houses are going to be in foreclosure. And, well, we know that property values will go down if a 110-mile-an-hour train comes, horn or not. last thing I just want to sort of inform you about a little bit is that the communities in Martin County South, these are golf club and residential communities where the tracks are right on their border. There are 6 or 7 of them that have banded together, and they've hired an attorney to see what their rights are. And I think more than that, they're hiring an attorney to see if they can stop the train, because they see it's going to be detrimental to their values. That's it. And they came up, and I know that they hired an attorney and $25,000 to begin with for that attorney to figure out, give them a master plan and where they're going. And so this is where the county and your adjoining counties are going. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing. Next, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
I would like to briefly cover real estate.
Just announce your name and address for the record.
Fry. I forget it every time. Phyllis Fry, 275 Date Palm Road. Thank you. And the resolutions. Real estate, RIF loan, and resolutions. Statistics from the public records reveal that the negative financial impact all aboard Florida will have upon our real estate values, starting with Martin and St. Lucie counties. The Martin County Property Appraiser's Office shows that more than 1,300 properties located within 200 feet of the rail tracks. Properties located within 400 feet of the tracks will lose 20% of their value, according to the 1994 study. Bill Hall, president of the Realtors Association in Martin County, cites a 1990 Atlanta study showing that a train's effects on housing values causes a drop between 5 to 20% within 1,000 feet from the tracks, increasing as the distance from the tracks decreases. Property values showed a loss of $94,254.55 in today's value on homes within 1,000 feet of the rail. Sales velocity will decrease commensurately. The study shows that the decline impacts lower-income homeowners the most. Value begins to drop off when the train projects are announced, even before the tracks are laid. Statistics prove that a fall in specific real estate values is guaranteed, with 32 trains predicted to operate at Category 3 hurricane force speeds of 110 to 125 miles per hour during 9 hours of every day. Statistics for St. Lucie County show that 1,536 parcels located within 400 feet of the tracks will be affected, with a total assessed value of $388 million. A 20% decline in these property values totals a loss of over $77 million. St. Lucie County represents 25% of the 4 northern counties, roughly speaking. 4 times $77 million is a loss of $310 million in assessed real estate value just for those properties located within 400 feet of the tracks. The marine industry, a $15 billion yearly business, will suffer losses affecting 6,000 vessels per month in season due to the impediment of navigation under the right-of-way maritime law as a result of bridge closures at 50% of normal operations. Let's talk about other costs, including debt to the taxpayers. Even though Florida passenger rail services are hemorrhaging money at a rate of $150 million per year, Florida East Coast Industries has applied for the RIF loan of $1.5 billion with projected costs of $2.5 billion. This loan dwarfs the largest prior loan of $562,900,000, and with no proven history of success, this very serious level of debt would be foisted upon the taxpayer should FECI default. The matter of collateral is highly questionable. From the RIF loan website, we know that collateral is not required. If the loan is coming from the $35 billion stimulus fund of 2009, it comes from the taxpayer. Most likely, FECI will divest itself of all aboard Florida, and taxpayers will have to subsidize the operation as they do Tri-Rail, Sunrail, and Amtrak. Given this risk and the guaranteed damage that will come to our East Coast communities, it's no small wonder that the list of resolutions from concerned property owners and taxpayers from the cities, the counties, and HOAs is substantial and growing. The following entities have signed resolutions in opposition to All Aboard Florida thus far: the City of Vero Beach, the City of Sebastian, Indian River County, North Beach Civic Organization covering Route 60 to Wabasso, the City of Mico, the City of Fort Pierce, the Village of Tequesta, St. Lucie Village, the Mariner Sands Country Club. A draft is in progress from Martin County Board of Commissioners, and a commitment for a resolution from the City of Port St. Lucie and Barefoot Bay has been given. Loblolly, Sailfish Point, Admiral's Cove, Plantation, and the marine industry are also intent upon signing resolutions in opposition to All Aboard Florida. In summary, we have over 12,000 signatures on a petition. We expect 25,000 opposing All Aboard Florida and growing. As Commissioner Solari mentioned, there were 400 people at the rally opposed about a week and a half ago, and 350 people attended the Homeowners Association in Jupiter and were lined up to the door and spoke in opposition to All Aboard Florida. 4 people spoke in favor. Just wanted to give you an update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Susan Meal, 1 Laurel Oak Lane here in Indian River County. Just a few things. First of all, I feel like I'm on a fast track to learn all about railroads in the last couple of months. I can tell you there are a lot of moving parts to this project, and they're not just wheels. You've talked about quiet zones, and you've talked about the costs and everything else. I really encourage you, first of all, if you haven't, to read the survey from the Federal Rail Administration's engineer, where he outlines what he's strongly recommending, but what All Aboard Florida has said they aren't going to complete. Have you seen that survey? And it has to do with the crossings just from Palm Beach up through St. Lucie County. It doesn't include our county yet, but one can assume that a lot of the crossings could be similar to ours. And if you don't have that report, we'll be happy to get it to you. My suggestion would be that you contact that engineer, or like we did, a Federal Rail engineer in the Atlanta office, and talk turkey about what this all means. For instance, horns. I was corrected recently at a meeting where I spoke that the horns aren't really on the trains, they're side rail horns, which means that they blast at the crossing site. They aren't moving, because the faster the train goes, the longer it takes for you to hear the horn. This is a technical and complex thing, but I would suggest that you don't wait until we get the EIS to know exactly what's happening. That's a suggestion. The other thing I wanted to mention, I have for you here today 2 documents that you can share. One is a letter that Phyllis referred to from a president of a realtors association south of here, outlining what he sees are the detrimental effects to real estate. And so you can have that copy. Also, I have for you a letter we recently sent to all of the elected officials in Brevard County who are considering a resolution as we speak. And that outlines a few things that we've picked up along the way in the last few weeks from the All Aboard Florida execs and others in our community. One of the things that we've been told is that our thought that this is a way to have their freight rail capacity increased and modernized in preparation for the Panamax cargo ships coming into Panama. I'm sure you've all heard about that. But we were told that really that's not true, and that they could still run those whether they had this second rail or not, and that's sort of like a fantasy. Well, I did some research, and the Florida FEC website, and it may be Florida East Coast Rail, I'm sorry, there's so many entities to follow, it's hard, says that they're the operator of a 351-mile freight system running along Florida's coast between Jacksonville and South Florida, and they're poised to efficiently handle increased volumes as the Panama Canal expansion moves toward completion. And their president, Mr. Hertwig, and chief executive officer of the Jacksonville-based FEC said that the opening of the expanded Panama Canal, he anticipates a shift of cargo to South Florida ports from Savannah and Charleston. Also, in a publication called Progressive Railroading in April of 2013, it discusses this same uptick. It says that the public-private effort has involved reconstruction of a 4.4-mile port lead, original rail mainline, rehabilitating the Bascule Bridge that connects the port of Miami to FEC, and constructing an on-port rail facility and expanding FEC's rail yard to make room for more traffic. And we have details from one of FEC's employees discussing the fact that these new advances and expansions will allow them to put more rail cars on a single freight train. So we believe that there is an increase in freight, and that one of the reasons they need a government loan is to expand that the ability and that capacity. And they are going to also be running passenger service on it. I call it their gift to us that keeps on taking. And that's another thing I want to mention. When we look at how much we might pay as a community to try to understand better and mitigate the factors of this train service or stop it altogether, I think we have to be doing a cost-benefit analysis here. I think we are seeing millions and millions of dollars that are going to go into this system. And eventually, we might own the system or at least be subsidizing it because no other passenger rail service in the country literally and truly makes any money and is not subsidized. So this will be subsidized, I believe. The question is when. So I suggest that what we spend today to possibly stop it and stop it from damaging our residents' properties and the lifestyle that we've created here for ourselves, which is not high density, is a benefit and is an investment in a future of Vero Beach that's critical. Let me just mention also, as far as rail goes, Jacksonville, Florida East Coast Railway has purchased 24 new locomotives specifically for heavy haul service up this 351-mile track. They're waiting for the loan to purchase the passenger stuff, is what I'm guessing. The other thing we've heard recently is that people are clamoring for a stop. I personally don't want to see us have a stop. I don't want to see us have a railroad here, a passenger service. I don't think that we want to live on a transit-oriented development plan. But what we do know about stops is that, for starters, if we study the statistics of the population bases and compare them to Acela, where you were, I guess, when you were in Boston, our population base is 1/12 the size of Acela's. We have a document from the Cato Institute outlining the population bases all over the country of passenger rail. We do not have the population density, I don't care what they say, to operate an effective, efficient, and profit-making rail system in this market from Miami to Orlando. So it's my belief that, and what they've said is in their own publications and materials and in talks to the Planning Council, that in fact, Mr. Cumber, the FECI Executive Vice President for Corporate Development, says FECI's priority is making all aboard Florida successful. And it doesn't want to move Amtrak or Tri-Rail to the line, which is what some people, I think, believe will happen. As for the train stops, he says that if at a future date that added stops and links, whether Cocoa, Tampa, or Jacksonville, show a promise of profit, all aboard will pursue them, but not now. I don't think this one shows a promise of profit, and I believe that if we ever did have a stop here, it would be because we paid for the station land, the parking land, the construction, the maintenance, the staffing, and the long-term costs involved in that stop. And I think when you combine those with all of the increased costs to taxpayers for this, I think you're finding out that you're wishing for, you shouldn't wish, be careful what you wish for. One other thing we just learned, too, in our recent talks around the community is that there are going to be increased costs to our EMS people. They're going to have to be trained specially in fighting or responding to train accidents. They're going to have new equipment, and they're going to have to keep that equipment maintained, and they're going to have to keep the training. Now, I haven't personally confirmed this. It's just something that came up in another meeting as another cost added to the municipalities. So the bottom line, we have a number of statistics and from the Cato Institute report, and that's in this file for you also, and some of the details that we've been uncovering in our search for the truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and if you would please leave your presentation with the clerk, and also Mrs. Fry, if you would leave your presentation with our city clerk. Thank you. Next, please. Yes, ma'am. State your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Jane Schnee. I live at 1022 Foster Road in Sebastian, and I'm here to represent what cannot be here, our furry, feathered, and scaled friends, okay? I haven't heard anybody really talk about that yet. I'm concerned about, well, all of them really with this coming through, and I want to make sure that Vero Beach at least can get some kind of mitigation if they find that there's a problem. I want to give you an example. I help the county monitor Florida scrub jays in their conservation lands. There's a family of scrub jays in Sebastian that flies back and forth constantly across the railroad tracks right behind Walmart. There's a grassy area there, and particularly this time of year when they're nesting, they feed their babies insects. So they're flying into that grassy area across the track. They're flying back very low, to take the food to the babies in the nest. One of these scrub jays happens to be blind in one eye, so he would have a little trouble with all these trains coming through. Many, many scrub jays, and they're disappearing very rapidly, unfortunately. We happen to have some in this county, and we really need to protect them. One happens to, as I mentioned, happens to be blind, so he'd have a problem. The Vero Beach Airport there has not been a survey, I don't believe, done since the fall of 2011. There are about 4 families. There had been 11 individual scrub jays at the Vero Beach Airport. I really don't know how close these scrub jays are to the railroad tracks. And even if they're not real close, there could still be an impact that if they need to expand their territories, it could bring them right down to where the railroad tracks are. So I think maybe the city of Vero Beach might want to look into that, and if there could be an impact, apply for some kind of mitigation for the scrub jays. And also the same thing with gopher tortoises. They're a protected species. And I know other land managers in other counties are looking into what's going to happen with gopher tortoises. They want to do a survey of gopher tortoises near the railroad tracks, and perhaps during this construction phase at least move them temporarily within their same conservation area. So I don't know if the city of Vero has looked into any of this impact on some of our threatened species, particularly the scrub jays and gopher tortoises. I know there's many, many other birds. Killdeer build their nests right on railroad tracks, for example. We've seen it. Gopher tortoises have a problem when they cross the railroad tracks. Sometimes they can't get out, and they're stuck. So now we're going to have 2 sets of railroad tracks for them to try to maneuver across, rather than one. I guess there's going to be 2 sets of tracks. The other thing is, not all of Vero Beach's homes. You do have some open areas. The airport happens to be one example, where animals do cross back and forth across these tracks. So that could be a problem. And putting all kinds of extra fences up could be even worse for the animals. They'll get trapped in there. So there's so many different things to consider. And I hope that when the EIS report does come out, that somebody is aware of this and can make sure that this is covered. I don't know who the consultants are that are coming down here to do this environmental study. They've never contacted me. I'm the one that I monitor all the scrub jays in the area. I know where they are. I know what they're doing. I know they're flying across the railroad tracks. So they might not even be aware, if they're from out of the state, that we even have such a species called a Florida scrub jay or gopher tortoises. So I'm just here to represent these. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and I will make sure that the proper folks get your name and your contact information, and they will be following up with you to get some information from you. And Ms. Kavaka's made a note of that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I believe
sir.
Ms. Delaney also represented that was a part of the process which they had been going through.
Okay.
That was part of her presentation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next, please. Yes, sir. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Donald Hood. I live at 440th Court here in Indian River County. I do not have a presentation to turn over. I just have some rough notes that I took while we were sitting here. One of the things that concerns me the most about all of these hearings is that if you listen to the folks coming up to testify, most of them can make a pretty good case about what they think is really happening here. And when you actually if you were to interrogate them with a professional who knew the other side of the story, it would collapse. For instance, let me take one fact that's everybody banters back and forth. High-speed rail. Is this a high-speed rail coming through here? The answer to that is no. High-speed rail, by definition to the FRA, is speeds in excess of 125 miles an hour. So anything below that is not considered high-speed rail, and that's what we're going to have here. The one thing that has not been identified, yet you keep hearing these audacious claims about 110 miles an hour through all cities at all times, and that's not true. The train will never exceed 79 miles an hour between Miami and Palm Beach. Well, we don't live in Palm Beach, we live here. What I do know, since I've asked the FEC, is that they have told me that the speed limits through any town, any residential area, or any county is dependent upon how many curves they have to negotiate and how much congestion there is for any one particular spot for someone to live in. Sounds a lot different from the horror stories you read in the newspaper. Let me take another one. Someone just mentioned 24 new locomotives. And they certainly can't be for all aboard Florida because those haven't been purchased yet. The 24 locomotives have been purchased. Does anybody here know why? Because the federal government has new sound regulations for their diesel engines, and the FEC is replacing both old engines and ones that do not meet those new requirements. This is something they would have had to do anyway. Okay, so we can say lots of facts, but it changes the whole picture of what we're doing here. Another one is, oh, they took offense. Another one is the real estate community. I'm sorry you're leaving. One of the things that I did just recently, because I was looking for an address in Fort Pierce, is I thought, oh, where are all these fabled train yards that they're talking about in Fort Pierce? So I actually took a look. I got the biggest surprise of my life. You got to do that. Go on Google Earth sometime and look along the east shore of the FEC railroad tracks. You're going to see some of the most expensive homes you've ever seen. Swimming pools, boats, docks, all within a rock's throw over your shoulder from the railroad tracks. Those people don't seem to be too concerned about it. They built that there. The railroad was there first. It's been there for almost 100 years, yet they decided that was a safe place to build and a quiet place. So the concerns about real estate are the things that most affect me because it appears, I've done a lot of research into this, and it appears that most of the controversy started after a few real estate agents from Jupiter started getting concerned about the overall effects on what it was going to be for us. So I don't want to go on and belabor every single fact that people have brought up, but I can tell you what, if it was a one-on-one debate and I had my research done, I think I could take them on. There's one or two that I know about that I'm not going to bring up that they're absolutely right on, but that has no bearing on this county because we don't have that situation here. So let me see if there's anything else. I'm also concerned, is Mr. Solari still here? I'm also concerned that one of our public officials shows up at a rally against the rail, and sure, that could be a fact-finding mission, but it gives the appearance that Indian River County, by having one of its commissioners attend, is taking the negative view. And I think appearances there aren't very good for public officials to be attending rallies on the negative side if they're not going to attend rallies on the positive side as well. One last thing. Let me ask you this question. The FEC has been a moneymaker for the state of Florida via jobs and businesses for close to 100 years. Why should we penalize them? Penalize? What are you asking? What are you saying penalize? All right, the pot of money that my understanding is the FEC is going to use to subsidize all this comes from a pot of $32 billion set aside by the Federal Railroad Administration to improve infrastructure. That's what FEC is planning to doing. Infrastructure is new tracks. They're going to lay new tracks between Cocoa and Orlando. They're going to improve some of the existing track. Why is it that Florida can't take advantage of what the rest of the country would gladly use? Why are we saying no to FEC because it looks like they're grabbing off money from the federal government when the government says, we'd like you to have it? Okay, let me ask one other question about this. Anybody know why Amtrak loses money? Anybody know? Amtrak is not designed to be strictly a passenger service for the rest of the country. It's a little-known fact that Amtrak is part of the Department of Defense. One of the things that the Department of Defense heavily invests in is infrastructure via the FRA, the FAA, and the FHA to make sure that in times of conflict, our country can defend itself. The Interstate Highway Commission set up the freeway systems in this country so that in times of war, in times of bad adversity, we'd have that. The FRA is there to make sure that we have infrastructure to move people and materials in a rapid way should the worst happen. Why are we penalizing FEC for trying to do this? Real estate values going down? I don't think so. I think they've already taken the hit. Because anybody know that the number of rail actually passing through Vero Beach has gone down in the last 10 years? Anybody bother to count that? There's been 24 trains that they used to do. Now they're down to about 12, maybe 14. Right? What happened to the rest of them? You didn't hear anybody yapping when it was quiet. Now all of a sudden they're back up and, oh, we can't stand the noise. There'll be less traffic on those rails with 12 freight trains and 2 minutes per hour for any location than there ever was before. Plus, as Mr. Coutu mentioned, we get the double benefit. If we make them quiet for the high-speed rail, we make them quiet for the freight trains, the county becomes quieter. Thank you for letting me ramble like this. I hope I've given you a few things to think about. And there's certainly more to this than some of the bleating that you hear from the general and public.
I have one question. It appears you heard what I heard in one of the presentations about the impact on property values.
Yes.
That was basically when new railroads go in, when they lay tracks. She's talking about when they lay track for a new railroad, then your property values will go down. But since this railroad has been here for over 100 years, and people have built after railroads here, that the impact on property values by an increase in the use of it, it didn't strike me as that would be inevitable.
No.
At the same level that was being presented.
That's right. Oh, I have to say this too. I do not own stock in FECI. I am not associated with the railroad. I'm not an employee of the railroad. I know two people because, yes, I've met Mr. Roberts. However, my goal is to see a stop in Indian River County, if at all possible. And I've expressed this to Mr. Roberts in the past. I sat down with a pen and pencil and took pad paper and was able to come up with 14 ways that this could benefit our county if we actually got a stop here. It won't help us nearly as much if we don't get a stop, but there's still benefits too. And that's probably a subject for another time. I will say this, I'd be willing to meet with any of you and all of you on a separate basis if you so like.
I was just going to mention that the in Amtrak, it is subsidized because required to be cover a large area, but that the part of it that makes a significant profit is the part of it that connects Washington to Boston.
Right.
That is a money-making part of Amtrak, and it subsidizes a lot of the others, so that a specific track connecting two major population areas or three major population areas in passenger can be profitable. It's just if you put all the unprofitable things on top of it, like you do with, so I take with a grain of salt those presentations that say there's never been a profitable passenger train, because that to me is just not stating the facts as they really are.
Well, there were profitable runs until the late 1950s when air traffic took over.
Right.
However, as you know, the federal government says we can't let this go away. This is too valuable to us as a resource. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we had Amtrak. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Dan, exactly correct on the profits, and the high-speed rail between Boston and Washington is responsible for some 75% of the profit realized by Amtrak. The profit margins on each ticket for the high-speed rail is well in excess of 50% of the cost of the ticket. More than 50% is profit. So the reality of high-speed rails, I know that there was a question, and I had questions for Mr. Roberts, about paying it back for federal loans. But the reality of high-speed rail on the East Coast is that they are, in fact, very profitable.
Yes, ma'am. Come right up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Florence Licata, and I'm at 1186 28th Street. I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm 1 block off the railroad. My house is my retirement. The gentleman who spoke, who said he was Mr. Solari's twin, from what organization? He said there was some sort of study to make sure that it wasn't going to affect one socioeconomic group more than another. Well, I guarantee you it's not going to affect Johns Island. It's going to affect me, and it's going to affect people like me who have houses that are less than, middle-income houses. And, I listened to this guy on public radio, and he said we should, as a city, mimic what's going to happen. We should put those barriers down the number of times a day and for the amount of time a day and see what it does to our city. Just look at it. Let's do a study like that. Why not? I live across from Michael Field, where 25,000 kids play a day. That Michael Field is 1,500 feet off of the airport. The airport pollutes us with between 1,200 and 2,000 pounds of lead a day. It spritz us with that, right? And so we've been trying to get the city to test Michael Field to say that Michael Field is safe. Well, who's going to say that this train isn't putting out some wild chemical or isn't polluting, the effects of it aren't going to be detrimental to the health of the people around it? Because we all know that noise causes health problems, And so, we've got the lagoon, and we've got the airport, and now we've got a high-speed train coming through here. I mean, how much can our neighborhoods tolerate as assaults on our environment that we all came here to love and enjoy? How much can we tolerate? Can we really tolerate a train coming through? This gentleman said, property prices, these houses were really big and beautiful down in Fort Pierce. Well, that's when there were 5 or 6 or 7, 8 trains a day that were going 50 miles an hour. It wasn't when we're proposing that 30 to 60 trains a day come through our area going 110 miles an hour. I mean, the dynamics are different. And so I think that the real estate lady has some valuable contributions. I certainly don't want to live next to that. We're bisecting our town. The beach is going to flourish, and West Melbourne is going to, Vero is going to flourish, but my area is going to become blighted. As far as I don't know. I just think that it's going to affect the middle-income person who lives in the downtown area really significantly, and we really need to think about it, you know. Thanks so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Anyone else from the general public? Yes, sir. Come right up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Al Manzi, 742 Holden Avenue, Sebastian, Florida. I wasn't going to talk, but this gentleman brought out some relevant facts I hadn't heard. 79 miles an hour is not high-speed rail. I got to agree with that. But I would assume that 79 miles an hour is about double, at least double what the freight trains are. And they talk about a quiet zone. The only thing being quieted is the horns. The physical noise of the train moving down the track is not going to be quieted. I don't care what kind of sign you put up. The Amtrak may be profitable between Washington and Boston, but we're not Boston and Washington. We're Orlando and Miami, and I can't see where they're going to have that many profitable trips a day. But having been involved with getting things done in an organization, I know one of the best ways to do it is to put something out there that's so outrageous that when you back off and say, well, I don't want that. I just want this much. Everybody creates, oh boy, we won. They're only going to do 8 trips a day. Oh man, they're only going to go 79 miles an hour to town. Could you imagine an ambulance coming through town at 79 miles an hour? An ambulance. Everybody wants it. You realize the traffic? You realize how often the bridges are going to have to go up and go down? I just don't see it being profitable. I believe it's a win-win situation for the railroad company, but for the average people, I live appreciable distance from the railroad tracks. I can hear the horn. Doesn't bother me. It's not right next to my house. And I can hear the train going down the track. And it's not going anywhere near 79 miles an hour. I think we're opening up ourselves to a host of little problems that we don't need. It'll only be profitable for some people. And that profit is going to come out of the taxpayer's pocket. Thank you. And thank the people that presented here, some very knowledgeable people, and thank you for your public service.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the general public would like to speak at this time? Hearing none, I'll close this portion of our meeting. Just want to go over a couple things real quick. The speed of the train was brought up a couple of times here at this meeting. If you go back and look at the record, the written record, and some of the meetings, the All Aboard Florida folks have stated it will be doing 110 through our city. Now, if the All Aboard Florida folks have changed that, I'm sure they'll let us know. And that's one of the things I would like to see in writing where it could be locked down, because the community here in Vero Beach City especially has concerns with the speed. The other thing I'd like our clerk to go over right quick is we do have a web page up that has all these materials that you've been hearing, the presentations and all. There's numerous reports that we put on there. All the commission members have sent in information, and we have it in one place where you can go click it and go to the page. Ms. Vaughn, would you go over that, please?
Yes, it's under the High Speed Rail Commission. If you go on the website, in the corner right-hand side, you'll see the High Speed Rail Commission. If you click on that, then they have all the articles that we've had so far for the High Speed Rail. And there are a lot of articles out there.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
And I will continue to put those articles out there as they come in.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to number 6 now, which is members' matters. Any member have any matters that they would like to bring up?
Yeah, I'd like to bring something up. At last week's city council meeting, the city council acted to extend the life of this commission until December because of the the fact that a lot of questions had not been answered or going forward. But they also made a specific request that we submit a report for the findings and a report prior to the June 9th ending of our time frame. We are having one more meeting on June 6th, I think it is, and at that point, I think we should be prepared to create a report. Now, we don't have staff, and unless we do some prior planning, I'm not sure or make give an assignment for certain things to be done to create this report. I'm not sure how we would put together a meaningful report to go to the city council that they've requested. I would suggest that we think about what a report would contain, and maybe talk among ourselves today in terms of what we would like to recommend, what we'd like to recommend, and then have someone, and I'd be happy to volunteer, sit down and draft a report following the recommendations that we would all agree on, so that we have some, and then have that circulated to the commission before the next meeting, so that we can have a discussion at that time of what we each think is an appropriate finding and recommendation.
Don, if I could. I think that we, through the chairman, have given reports and updates to the council. And perhaps Chairman Dage could provide the reports he's already provided. I think all that they're looking for are the actual recommendations that have been made by this commission.
They didn't seem to feel that. They seemed to think they wanted a comprehensive report. And
then they should have given us staff people that could support that, I guess.
Actually, if I may, I've been already thinking about this to be helpful to all the commissioners. I was at the last city council member, as Mr. Cortell was, and I understand what they're looking for. They're looking for a up-to-date work product of where we've come thus far. And I'll be sending out to the clerk some suggestions for each commission member to make your suggestions. That will come back to the clerk. We'll compile that information together. It will come forward at the next meeting. We all can take a look at it, fine-tune it, then we'll box it up again and send it to the council. Or I'll deliver to the council, whatever your pleasure is. Next commission members, anyone else with a thought on it?
Yeah, Don, I think you're correct that there's not enough time between the meetings and to do this unless we do something differently. And part of Ken's suggestion that we submit things, it's not a violation of the Sunshine Law. Tammy, stop me anytime when I'm incorrect. It's not a violation of the Sunshine Law for us to send suggestions to the city clerk so long as we do not respond to them except here in the public meeting. So I think that it probably would be a very good idea if all commissioners would take the time between now and June the 9th to put something together as a submission, and we can beat up on those things at the next meeting.
The meeting's actually June 4th.
June 4th.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. June 9th is the city council meeting.
Right. And we have to we have to have it ready for then, and I don't see a problem.
Actually, the council meeting is June 3rd. June 9th is when this commission sunsetted.
Right. This was supposed to sunset, but the city council did vote to extend it to December.
Yes.
And June 9th is the date they want the report?
The work product.
They want it by June 9th, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You making a motion?
And, Don, if that's in the form of a motion, I'd be happy to second it, that we do that. I don't think we need a motion, but Penny, I think, would like one.
No, I would make a motion that we use the next meeting to comprise a report of findings to the city council following the procedure suggested by our chairman.
Second.
Ms. Vach, roll call, please.
You don't need a roll, Dave?
No.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Hetty?
Yes.
Mr. Moylan?
Yes.
Mr. Croteau?
Yes.
Mrs. Chandler?
Yes.
Chairman Daig?
Yes. Okay, that takes care of that. We talked about the sunset of our commission.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
that
sir.
takes care of one member's comments. I don't know whether there's other members, but I certainly have some
Are you ready?
comments.
Go ahead.
Responding to the, and we still have Mr. Roberts is going to give a presentation too, right?
He did not ask, but Mr. Roberts is here with us. If he would like to say a few words, he's more than welcome after you're finished, Mr. Hedden.
Okay, my understanding was here to answer some questions.
Whatever he would like.
One of the things I just point out at the very beginning, and it seems that a lot of people have left, but one of the strengths of this government is in the willingness of the majority to protect the minority rights. And we don't rule in this country by mob rule, but rather we rule under the law, and All Aboard Florida does have rights. And we shouldn't have governing authorities taking positions against private business that are positions that are contrary to that business's rights that they already have. And I think that All Aboard Florida does have rights. I think that the railroads were here long before many of these subdivisions, and I think it was pointed out that as far as the devaluation of these subdivisions because of the railroad, these places went up long after the railroad's been here since the 1800s.
1893.
Yeah, and the Flagler was pushed by people up in Daytona to extend it down, and he extended it down to West Palm, and that was when West Palm Beach really became a place on the map, and the railroads helped those areas, and it was because of the railroads that those areas grew. So historically, railroads have helped both real estate values and have helped the communities along the way. There's been some pretty much constant comments about railroads lose money, railroads lose money, railroads lose money. And I pointed out a couple of minutes ago that the Acela, the high-speed rail, in fact, makes money. But one of the things that the railroads are required to do is to run in areas that are not profitable in order to keep those sections of the country all connected. And a good example of that is the Alaska Railroad, which I've taken from Alaska, from Fairbanks down to Anchorage. And there's virtually nobody on those trains, but they're required to run a certain number of times a week. And that's true in many of the routes for Amtrak. They're required to run, and that's part of what those subsidies are for. Those that build right next to the railroads and then complain about the value. I'm sorry, and I know that they'll throw stones at me when I leave, but I have a hard time sympathizing with that. And it's, as far as the cost of the stops are concerned, if the high-speed rail decides they want to stop in Vero Beach, I would hope that they would do that because they see a potential where there's going to be some usage, some people that'll ride it. And the cost of the stop, I think, like the cost of everything else, should be the cost of the railroads. This is, All Aboard Florida presents this as a money-making deal. They're going to make some money. That's fine. God bless them. I hope they make money. And there was a gentleman that stopped me, I forget where, one of the coffee houses in town, and said, Brian, if the first train out of Orlando were to stop in Vero Beach, and the first train out of Miami were to stop in Vero Beach, that would put a stop in Vero going south and a stop going north, and it'd only be one stop a day. That could be done with a kiosk, and there isn't really a huge cost for Amtrak. For for All Aboard Florida. You put your credit card in the kiosk and you pay for your ticket. By the way, there was, and maybe the city manager knows something about this. My wife called me up and she says, "This is strange, Brian." She says, "I'm stopped at the railroad tracks." In fact, I was in Boston when she called me, and there was the police were down, and there was somebody with their head, literally their head on the tracks, and there was quite the commotion.
No, sir, I'm not familiar with somebody with their head on.
It might have been 12th Street where she crossed. That wouldn't be the city's. That would be the sheriff's department.
I'm just not familiar with that. There was a question by the chairman on Friday. We had a traffic accident, but it actually was on Highway 1, and it was a car coming across the railroad tracks, but they had the green light and going across Route 1, and somebody ran a light on Route 1, but I'm not familiar with the head on the track.
If I could, thank you, Mr. City Manager. The person or head on the track, however you want to put it, there was an individual that was laying on the track. I did witness that. In fact, I was helped call
that here in the city?
Within the city limits on one of our Twin Pairs tracks. I think the one heading east. Yes, so that is so. There was somebody on there for a little bit.
Someone had talked about a study with putting the gates down, and maybe Mr. Roberts, when he speaks, can address that, and or the city manager or Monty. Geez, that just sounded like a good idea. If that was possible for a week to lower the gates down at appropriate intervals, so that the people in the city could see what the traffic would look like. And if we did it for a week, it might give the public some idea of what. And I can tell you that on my experience and my photos in the commission once, I'll bring back a slideshow presentation with both still and video shots of that ride on the Acela, and I didn't see any place where there was traffic that was really backed up to any degree. The train goes through it relatively quickly. The questions of the profits, I spoke about that. And then I guess I have some questions for Mr. Roberts when that time comes.
You done?
Yeah, except that I have some questions for Mr.
Understand.
Roberts.
Any other members have concerns? Mr. Moment, sir?
I have a number of questions for Mr. Roberts. I'll wait for him.
Okay, Mr. Roberts, thank you for coming up. I really appreciate this.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very, very brief for a couple reasons. I'm supposed to be in Melbourne at 6:30. I know I'm going to be late, but so I'm going to answer your questions short answers and try to get through them as best as possible. A couple things I wanted to bring up, being a little repetitive. The EIS, Commissioner Solari mentioned it, that we have asked the Federal Railroad Administration to extend the comment period by an extra 30 days. We have asked we've told the Federal Railroad Administration that we will be expanding our public input meetings from 6 to 8, so there will be one in every county. I know that there's been expression of concern in the Indian River and other counties as to whether we were going to make people travel, and we think it's a fair thing for people to ask to have one in every county that's being affected, so we're very happy to do that.
Thank you.
I wanted to mention something that came up at the last meeting that I was not at, but I did watch it later on the streaming when Ms. Delaney, Dr. Delaney was testifying, and I just want to clarify a couple points because there was some confusion, and one of them I mentioned to you, Mr. Couteau, about the discussion that came up with Homeland Security. And I just want folks to know that the All Aboard Florida train does not have to do anything that is particularly different that is already done with Amtrak passenger trains. We do not have a TSA presence like you find in the airport. That was misstated information. Probably the confusion comes from the fact that we are doing it slightly differently, and that is people can reserve seats on our train as opposed to Amtrak. People will be able to check baggage. Of course, you can on Amtrak as well. And that checked baggage will be screened. Any baggage you carry onto the train does not need to be screened. And you will show an ID with your ticket, which I'm not sure if you do that with Amtrak or not. You just get a ticket and get on them. I can't remember. It's been a while. But we will have no metal detectors. We'll not have any sort of long line to get in. But you will, at our stations, get your ticket, you'll show your ID, and you will be escorted into the lounge, the waiting lounge, which might be different from the other part of the concourse that has the shops and the restaurants and that kind of thing. So I wanted to clear that up. The other question was who's writing the EIS? People keep talking about that. FRA is writing the EIS. We provided data that has been requested. The FRA is also used, and Commissioner Solari mentioned outside consultants to write specialists in this field to write the EIS at their direction. We do not get to hire the consultants, but we have to pay for it. But we do not give the consultants direction. FRA gives the direction, and we provide data that is requested that comes into the that'll go into the final document. We expect that EIS again to be published hopefully the end of May, but certainly early June, at which point the public input meetings will be scheduled in every county. I think that's all I have, and I'll be glad to answer any quick questions.
Yeah, a quick question. So the hearings, the EIS public hearings, will be conducted by AAF, by All Aboard Florida?
Well, the FRA is still in charge of those hearings, but in terms of the logistic and physical work, we're going to have to do that. And the FRA consultants are present, FRA people are present, Florida. Can't remember.
Who will actually be running the meetings?
Well, it's not going to be a public hearing where you stand up at a podium and give speeches. It's not like a town hall meeting.
Okay.
It is just a large room, might be a banquet hall in a hotel or an auditorium like the Heritage Center. And so you, public, would be able to go in and see diagrams, maps, materials on easels and on tables and on videos of the plan. And there will be personnel stationed at various stations in the meeting to answer questions and brief people on various aspects of it, operational aspects, environmental impacts, routing, station configuration and design, those kinds of things. So there's no speeches, there's no public input in terms of standing up like I am doing here, but you will be able to study the plan with detailed maps and diagrams available, and then you will have a piece of paper that is your comment card, and you put it into the box, as it were.
Question on that. You have your comment card. Mm-hmm. How does it work for the county governments and city governments? How do they do their input?
They write letters or write emails. You don't have to be at the input meeting. You do not have to be at the public meeting to make comment. And most, the city governments and county governments will, at the appropriate time, draft letters to be sent to the Federal Railroad Administration.
Now, is it letters, and in those letters, will they, the way the process works, let's say when you say the word letter, people just think maybe 1 page or 2 page. But with concerns that, let's say, use our city, we may have a number of concerns that will need to be addressed, and a letter size like this may not be big enough. So how does that, you just put the package in the box? How does that work?
Well, again, if you're at the meeting, mm-hmm. generally, I mean, you're given a form, but you could bring extra pieces of paper and attach it however you want to do it.
Okay.
There's no formal or there's no set one way to do it. A city could write a 10-page letter or a 2-page letter.
Understood.
An individual could write a 10-page letter or just fill out a comment form in hand and do 3 or 4 lines.
And Mr. Roberts, there's actually a mailing address which people who have comments on the EIS can actually mail packages to, correct?
That's correct. There will be a contact name and a mailing address, and I believe an email address as well. That'll be published on the website. We'll give it to you. You can put it on your website. We will be doing public notice in newspapers as is required, and that information will be there.
And normally there's an individual from the FRA that actually is designated to oversee the EIS, and that's the person that we'd actually send this information to, correct?
It all goes to the FRA, does not go to the All Aboard Florida.
If I understand it, then this is not really a hearing, it's a presentation. It'll be a presentation of the plan. Will it also be a presentation of the EIS findings? In other words, whatever has been found by the EIS that the FRA has done, would that also be presented in terms of these are the issues that have been raised with this plan? Or is it just going to be a presentation of AAF plans?
No, there'll be major issues that the FRA finds, but the document's going to be rather extensive, and I don't think it is possible to showcase every item that is brought up, but major items will be addressed at the meeting, and of course it is incumbent on the public, and I know city officials will be diving deep into the IS document.
So but the planning and the structure of the presentation will be basically run by All Aboard Florida?
That's what he's saying.
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Roberts, if I may, so what you're suggesting is that as part of the EIS process, and this is only a part of the process, first of all, there is an EIS that's drafted by the FRA. That is then given to the public in whether they have other questions about it or they go through it, they make their comments, and all those comments are submitted to the FRA by a set deadline. In this situation, there's a 75-day deadline at this point.
That's what we requested, I'm not sure.
Okay, and then you're saying that then there are 8 sites, 2 additional, as you pointed out, and thank you for that, that there will be a presentation of people to come in and understand certain aspects of the EIS to be an educational type function, to give an introduction or a display so they can review the plans. However, then what happens is that the FRA takes all this information, these comments, and then the FRA then reviews all that, and they make the final decision on what needs to be done at some time after the expiration of the 75 days.
Sure. So the draft EIS is nothing more than a draft, and it is designed to solicit input for people to either to critically examine the draft and tell the FRA whether they missed something or whether they think they ought to look for an alternative or how they want to do it. Then, pardon me, sir, they take all the comments and they sort of put them in buckets. So there might be this stack of letters deals with noise. This stack of letters deals with crossing traffic issues. This stack of letter might deal with scrub jays. So they'll say in the final EIS we received 30 letters on noise, 20, and then they will repeat some of the comments. Suggestions were made to do this and that. Certainly not every comment is taken seriously. As you can imagine in this type of process, some stuff's pretty outlandish. So they take the serious comments and incorporate it into the final EIS. That will take some months, especially we expect a higher than level number of our normal number of comments to come in. So that'll take some months. The process probably will take much of the rest of this year.
Okay. How long will this presentation last? Are we talking about a 1-hour period or a 5-hour period, or what is the contemplated length of this?
When we did them, we've done a run round already in June, and I think we booked 3 hours. And I think they went at least that long. We don't go home till everybody else goes home.
Okay, so you're going to be open-ended a little bit on it?
A little bit, yeah. It's not. If we start at 5 and we say we're open till 7, we're not going to say everybody out at 7 o'clock. We're going to give people an opportunity to take a look.
Ms. Avery?
My concern is that we were told all the time that this would be our opportunity to make suggestions for what we wanted, and now we're going to do that by simply putting a piece of paper in a box, and we don't know what's going to happen to that piece of paper in a box. So when the papers are all sorted and how do we know that something's going to be done with it? Who is actually going to do something with those pieces of paper? And then do we get to review that, or is it simply that's the fait accompli?
Exactly.
FRA has custody of those comments, and they will take them, and they incorporate them, and they actually publish them in the final EIS.
Ms. Chandler?
And they'll suggest changes that might be different than the draft based on those comments.
So would it be fair to say to the public that wants to make comment that they should consider the topic under which they're making that comment to possibly guarantee that it will get to the right place in the
Sure, I think
final doc?
I think you need to be a little specific on what your concerns are. Sure.
Mr. Hetty?
Yeah, I would expect that the comments probably are self-explanatory with respect to which column they go in, but I think that you had made some comments earlier, and I think absent any public hearing, where the public's questions are allowed to be asked, and the All Aboard Florida provide public answers that are on the public record. Anything short of that is a dog and pony show, where they're going to put out a presentation which shows all of the best possible things. All Aboard Florida is paying for this, and All Aboard Florida is going to give you the rosy side of the story. And absent an opportunity for the public to ask questions and receive answers, I think that Debbie, I think you're right. I think it's already accomplished.
Mr. Hetty, I would sort of respectfully disagree, because we do not get to see the final document until we see it the first time that you see it. And it comes out in the Federal Register is the first time we get to see what they have written. We don't have input in the final product.
Well, of course you have. Of course you have input. You're contributing to the study all along, and your consultants are contributing to the study all along. So sure, you do have input. One of the problems that I have is that when the Federal Rail Authority puts together an EIS and they sign their name to the study, that their best interest is in defending the environmental impact statement. And when you have the governing officials defending the statement, without the public being able to ask questions and get answers, I think you have a problem. And
I think it would be much better to have the FRA defending it than having All Aboard Florida. Wouldn't you agree? Be the one who write it?
No. Well, what I would agree with is that it would be nice if we had All Aboard Florida come to a public meeting, such as this commission, where they could sit down at that table and answer questions by the commissioners, questions that we've been asking for a long time, and All Aboard Florida has been woefully short on answers. That's been my experience so far, and I'm not against railroads, and I'm not against high-speed railroads. And I take a lot of heat for that. But what I am against is some entity coming into town and saying, by the way, this is what we're going to do. We don't care whether you like it or not, and that's that. And you're going to pay for any safety. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we've been told. At the you and I first met, and quite frankly, at our first meeting, I refused to really discuss the railroad, because I viewed at that first meeting, my understanding was you were a part of this commission, and therefore it would be a violation of sunshine. So I didn't ask you questions specifically about the railroad at that meeting. We talked about other things and other railroads, but not the one through Vero Beach. At the first meeting here, I had questions, and you wouldn't answer me. And if you want to go back and do a replay, those meetings are on the city's website. And questions: who is All Aboard Florida? Who are you? And the answer back was, well, we're private. And it's okay. Well, geez, I'd like to know the names of the biggest owners, and what percentage of the top 90% ownership. Who are those people? Is that 10 people, 5 people? And I asked those questions, and I got no answers. I asked about schedules, because it'd be interesting to know if the schedules of the trains, for an example, had a train from Miami crossing here at the same time that a train from Orlando was crossing, then instead of 32 crossings, you'd be talking about 16 crossings. You'd cut them in half if Vero Beach happened to be the right spot for an intersection, and I wasn't given any answers about that. And I can travel the Acela, and I can tell you when I'm going to be at what stop when, because those are things that they're schedules they hadn't developed. And even the train that was proposed from Orlando to Tampa, you can go online and you can find out where the trains were scheduled to be at what time. I've asked those questions and have been given zero answers. And I don't think I don't think it's a difficult question. I think it's something you must have, and I don't know why you refused to answer that. I asked about the top management of All Aboard Florida or the umbrella corporations and where did they come from. I asked about the connections from the bottom to the top. We've had people come to this meeting and say, geez, do you know how tight-knit a group this really is, that we have former staffers of congressmen who are now sit on commissions. We have former staffers of congressmen that now head up All Aboard Florida. In fact, you yourself. I think our former staffer of one of the congressmen that used to chair the Transmission Committee that hands out dollars. You used to work for one of those commissioners, and I believe you used to work for another one of the congressmen. So the ties to the Congress from the people that are involved, all the way from rail commissions to All Aboard Florida, it seems like it's a pretty tight-knit group.
I would hope that this All Aboard Florida would hire somebody who has experience in transportation as opposed to somebody who has experience in health care. That is why they hired me. It has nothing to do with the member of Congress that I worked for, Mr. Hetty. And let me just also say one other thing. You continually characterize this project, this company is making this city or this county pay for safety upgrades. And I will tell you once again, we have said it from day one, from last October when we announced it, we are paying for 100% of the safety upgrades. And I will tell you also that we are complying with all federal railroad regulations with regard to sealed corridors as they have defined it, which is very poorly defined, by the way. But whatever the FRA and Florida DOT tell us we have to do with regard to safety and sealed corridors, we are going to do that.
Okay, and then the reports, here's the problem, and if that's the case, then that's fine, that's wonderful, and now we're on the same page, because I think you should be paying for the cost of any safety upgrades, and I think you should be paying that 100%. And if you're doing that, then part of a big portion of my problem goes away. But I'm told that the safety provisions that are being suggested by Florida DOT, you're not complying with those.
Well, that's what was reported in the paper, but we will be, sir.
We will.
My understanding is that the written safety requirements for Florida and for the Federal Railroad Administration is for speed of 79 miles an hour, and they have not yet promulgated standards for speeds greater than that. Is that true?
I do not know.
I think that's where frankly, my understanding is that's where the controversy comes from. But I have a couple of questions on another subject. The two basic problems that we're looking at as it affects our city is the noise that'll be generated, the increased noise because of the increased traffic. That's why quiet zones are a concern. And secondly, the disruption of the east-west traffic on our highways. And one question we asked early was what would be the gate timing? I know that it will take, at 110 miles an hour, it'll take 5.3 seconds for the train to go through. A 900-foot train at a speed, that's easy to calculate. One day I was there and I watched the gate go up after a freight train passed, and it took 7 seconds after the last car of the freight before the gate was up and could go. But I don't have a handle on whether or not you'll have the same gate activity before a train arrives at the intersection. How far ahead of the train? Do you have that date?
I do. Okay. So the total amount of time that a gate would be down is roughly about 60 seconds, in some cases less. The train has to, because we're adding positive train control to the network, which is a GPS-based system that allows trains to talk to each other, the trains to talk to the tracks. It allows the train to know in advance whether there's an obstruction at a crossing that is ahead. If there is an obstruction, the train automatically slows down. It is if the conductor collapses or something, the train knows, and the train starts to stop on its own. So it has to be far enough away, depending on the speed that it's going, to be able to stop before it gets to that crossing if there's an obstruction or something wrong. So that distance is going to vary depending on the speed that it's being approached.
I understand. So therefore, we're looking at, you said about a minute. I had calculated about 50 seconds. So I'm assuming that the gate will start going down at least 30 seconds before.
That's correct.
Before the train arrives, so that we can use that minute and say it won't be more than a minute.
Correct.
Unless there's an obstruction or something like that going on. So that we can calculate exactly what the impact is going to be in terms of the amount of time that this will happen during a day. If we go to the maximum of 32 trains, that would be the increased time in which we can calculate that.
And I think that most traffic light cycles are even almost sometimes 2 and 3 minutes, depending on how big the intersection is. But I think mostly through here, I think we'll be close to a minute because we're smaller roads. I do not remember you asking me if the two trains are meeting where they're meeting, and I'll go back. I wrote that down, and I'll see if I can find that out. I don't know if that has where we are in the modeling of that.
Mr. Roberts, I have a question. This is the concern in the EIS study process, the process that you spoke about here a few moments ago. That process, is that in writing where we can have that to post it on our webpage so the citizenry will know?
I'm sure it's on the Federal Railroad website or the National Environmental Policy Act. If you Google NEPA, probably that process is there. I looked it up myself just the other day and just Googling it and saw that.
Could you be so kind to please send it to our city clerk? Because that would be the official way that things are done that we can post for our citizens.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to continue with my questions, thank you for the answers on the 60 seconds for an example, and I had written down some more long-winded things to get to that number. The Monty total miles, one end to the other of the city, 7 miles?
2.5.
2.5.
2.5 total miles from border to border. And
7.2 seconds.
Yeah, and even at 60 miles an hour is 5,280 feet. It's a mile a minute. So the city's only going to be the train's only going to be in the city at 2 miles a couple of minutes total. You talk about a 60-second maximum with the gate closed. I can tell you that there's been a lot of merchants in downtown that want to spend some tax dollars to slow the traffic down. This is the equivalent of adding an extra traffic light that might slow the traffic down. So I would say that you're providing a benefit in a way. And I know there's going to be people that aren't very happy about me saying that, but if it does slow the traffic down through the midtown, through the downtown section, that might be a benefit to them rather than being so concerned about all the negatives. Maybe that is a benefit. On my trip to Boston, it was interesting. I stopped and talked to people along the way. Actually, I went up by car because I wanted to talk to people, and I stopped in some of the cities that have some of the rail connections, and it was interesting hearing some of the comments. You know, some people don't use the trains, some hate the trains, others use them, others love them. And one of the comments I got was interesting. They said, "Oh, you mean Robin Ride, huh?" I said, "Robin Ride?" And they said, "Yeah, kind of like Robin Hood." Well, I totally don't understand what you're saying. And they said, "Well, Robin Ride, that's what they use these trains for. They come from the bigger cities and get off at some of the smaller communities, so they ride, and when they get there, they rob, and then they ride back, so they're rob and ride." And I mean, some small communities near some of the stops where some people were concerned, and so I can see that there's a benefit by stopping, and maybe there's a benefit by not stopping. by just buzzing right through. If the committee wants to see this slideshow, one of the things I think that you'll see is that there were on the sealed corridors, there were fences that were there. There were fences that were broken. There were fences that were down. There was areas with no fencing. There were crossing gates that looked much like the ones in Vero Beach, and there were also areas, which kind of surprised me, where the train was going by, and there was no gates at all. Period, nothing. And I guess maybe there might have been a sign there that said railroad crossing, which I couldn't see, but there were no gates. And the train is safe. It doesn't crash into people. It doesn't crash into animals. It doesn't crash into cars. The high-speed rail went through areas that I would characterize as being pretty rundown, but it also went through some upscale areas, and they went through high density and low density. And I could make an argument for both sides of the property values, and I saw some beautiful areas, and I saw other areas that were run down, but probably were run down for a very long time. It didn't look like this happened since Acilla came through. It looked like areas that had been blighted for many years. I know when I took Metro North into the city a lot of years ago, there were some areas on Metro North where, was that in New York City, where incredibly expensive real estate and millions of dollars. And in fact, my home sat on my home bordered the railroad tracks in New York, and the train would light up the house when it went by, and which never bothered me. And I certainly heard the noise, and I bought the property next to the railroad tracks. I knew it was there when I bought it. But anyway, I still have all of the same questions. You can go back and you can look at the meetings, but all of the same questions. And if you want to answer them now, I mean, I'd like to hear the answers. Who are the biggest owners of All Aboard Florida? What is the skin that they have in the game? And the top management, where did they come from? And the answers that I've received so far is, it's a private entity. And
so let me quickly answer that, Mr.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
The hierarchy, the management of our company, All Aboard Florida and Florida East Coast Industries, is available right on the website. You click on the team, and you get all the names there. You can even look at biographies. If you want to know who runs Fortress Investment Group, you go to the Fortress Group. The names and the pictures of the leaders of that are on the website. Skin in the game. This project will cost, when we're finished, about $2.5 billion. The loan request, as you know, which is public knowledge, was $1.5 billion. We are putting up hundreds of millions of dollars of our own cash, on our own equity in form of cash and other equity. Our company's cash plus institutional investors. The loan committee, which is an independent agency, independent company, as it were, firm, that the Federal Railroad Administration has tasked with evaluating the creditworthiness of the loan, has all that information in terms of our financial statements and ridership studies and the business plan in order to evaluate whether it is a creditworthy loan. They will decide. They will decide whether the loan is creditworthy. They will decide the collateral. We've offered full collateral for this loan, but they will decide whether it's enough collateral or too much, and they will decide on the credit risk premium that we have to pay.
That package that for the loan, it went to the it's tax dollars that will guarantee a federal loan. And
there's no guarantee. No, it is a collateralized loan, not
collateralized federal loan. And since it's a federal loan, that would means it's coming from us. And shouldn't we be entitled to see the information in those loan documents?
When the loan is determined whether they approve the loan or deny the loan. What you could probably do a Freedom of Information Act request. I don't know what will be available, but some of that information will be available. Much of that information is proprietary to the company and always will be. But of course, the loan will become public information at that time. The terms of the loan will be.
Well, I guess there's the rub. I think that if it's proprietary information, and you're asking us, the taxpayers, to support the loan, I think the taxpayers, the public, should be able to see what the details of the loan.
Mr. Roberts, if I may, you're suggesting that what information that would regularly be available to the public in these types of loan is the same information that All Aboard Florida will have to, or that the government will give away regarding All Aboard Florida. All Aboard Florida is not getting any different treatment regarding any other loan applicant in the past, correct?
No, you have to remember one other thing, Mr. Moylan, is that this operation is unlike any other high-speed rail or intercity passenger rail system currently under development today. If you look around the country, every other high-speed rail system is being given free cash by the bucket load. California is $68 billion. It's not a loan, it's a gift. The Obama administration was giving away millions of dollars all over the country for systems to upgrade or upgrade their corridors to reach a, quote, high-speed status. Florida got $2.5 billion, as you know, for a mere 90 miles. And that was sent back. In Seattle to Portland, they built a system.
Florida didn't actually get any money because we sent it back. But we were offered a couple $billion.
That's what I'm saying is we're a private company putting our own company at risk, our own assets at risk to do something that we think is viable in this corridor and is not being done anywhere else in the country. In Seattle to Portland, they got $500 million to increase their speed and their time between those two cities. You know how much they got for $500 million? 7 minutes. So I think we're doing something that is very unique and should be at least recognized as a private sector operation. You can take any view you want as to the efficacy of some sort of a private loan, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. A public loan. But in the end, it's private money that will be funding this operation, and will win or fail based on that, and we'll win.
When gentleman on my right talked about you being giving the same information will come out to the public, that's typical. And the problem I have with that is that the information that came out from the public in Solyndra and right down here in St. Lucie County, where the taxpayers wound up losing millions of dollars and tens of millions of dollars, and the county here out on State Road 60 here lost $1 million a few years back on one of these public-private partnership loan deals.
Well, Solyndra was an R&D grant. There was no collateral for that. I don't know the details of digital domain.
But my point is
the only taxpayer money that has been spent so far in this project is what it's been spent by the county to hire lawyers.
Yeah, and I objected to that. I think that's objectionable to me. I don't think the county should be spending that kind of money. I don't think that we should be calling out the dogs against you. I'm not against you. But what I would like to see is I would like to see...
Should I put that down as a 4?
I'm not against you. I haven't been against you. I'm against not being told the truth. I'm against not being given the information. I'm against the company that says, hey, well, we don't have to give you that because nobody else does. I think that what you're doing is you're applying for federal grants or federal loans, whatever the case may be. All of that is taxpayer dollars, and I think that if we're going to give it to you, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I think that we ought to be given the information. I think it ought to be public knowledge. What the assets are that you're putting up, what the skin in the game is. Let us know what the details are. Let the public scrutinize it.
And Mr.
Point
Hedy,
taken.
It sounds like you have a problem with the process more than anything overall.
No, I don't have a problem with the process. I just like to know if they're going to apply for loans. That's fine. Tell me the skin in the game. Tell me who the players are. Tell me how much money you're going to put up. Tell me what the collateral security is going to be. If the collateral security is some rails if they defaulted on the loan, what good would those rails do the public? How would we collect?
Real quick, the collateral is land in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. The collateral is the easement rights this railroad has to operate on the FEC corridor. The collateral's in our rolling stock. Again, the independent financial analyst will, of course, determine whether that's enough.
Well, the rolling stock, that was another question that I had. I asked you at the very beginning, I said, geez, these...
Who is it?
Yeah, how many trains are you going to buy?
10 trains.
Pardon?
10 trains.
10 trains, okay. And the 10 trains, who's going to make them? Where they're going to be built? And, are the specs on these things out there? Can we see some information on these trains? And I've been given no information.
Absolutely. You'll see it all. As you can imagine, a public project, a private project like this, where we have a lot of moving parts. We have a certain schedule of when we want to make big announcements, and that is due to come.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Thanks,
I know you have to attend another meeting,
Thanks,
and
Mr.
thank you
Chairman.
so much for your time, and thank you for all the questions. Thank you, sir. Let's move to, we've covered members' matters. We've asked Mr. Roberts a lot of questions. I actually have some more questions from Mr. Roberts, but I know he has to go. I'll send them to you in writing. And thank you for sending us the information on how this public comment time works. We'll be looking for that. Thank you. Under my matters, we've already talked about the resolution sunsetting that this commission acts under, and I thank you all in advance for going forward to stay on the commission to bring your thoughts to the table here. Our next meeting dates, number 8, June 4th, 2014 at 4 p.m., June 30th, 2014 at 4 p.m. Thank you very much. Any other business to be brought up at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I will be leaving town on the 16th or 17th of June, and I will not be returning until first week in September, so that I will not be able to attend any meetings between after the June 4th meeting until I return in September. So I just wanted to let you know so you can get an alternate or something to sit for that period of time.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Anything else, please?
That may be likely in my case, too. I have a lot of vacation time planned.
So you'll be gone also?
Some of that time, yes.
They're leaving us. Okay.
Nice.
Leaving me. Okay, anything else? I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, folks.